Hey there, I am here to give you guys a bit of a product review on a DIY split mini AC heating unit installation and hopefully some helpful tips that I struggled to get answers to from the videos that are out there now. So what I am dealing with is I've got a 600 square foot finished barn and a 900 square foot unfinished barn. Those both become important here in a minute when we talk about the system that I put in. I've got electric out here only, so from a heating perspective, all I have is baseboard electric heaters. That adds up in the winter, especially here in Colorado where it can get down to zero, even colder. And I wanted something more efficient and more importantly in the summertime that's going to give me some climate control because it gets awfully hot in here. So started looking at systems that were available and quickly realized that a mini split made the most sense. So did a quick Google search, found hvacdirect.com, and that became my center for doing research, finding what I needed, getting the system and installing it. So HVAC Direct was incredibly helpful. And it made it very user-friendly, quick delivery. And so I quickly sized up what I needed. I got an 18,000 BTU system. I did the DIY kit for the quick connect benefits, and let me tell you what I've got. So we're gonna make our way over, and you'll kind of see the room and what we're dealing with. It's 30 foot by 20 foot with 10-foot ceilings, so it's a bit of a space to have it climate management, and I wanted to make sure and size it right. 18,000 is over-engineered, but it is better to go big than go small. So head unit, you can see up here, I might use the wrong terms, but you get the idea. It's running right now. I'm gonna be quiet for a second. Right, it's quiet. So I've got it set to 68 degrees. Down below are the thermostats for the baseboard radiant heaters, and it's at this point just backup. So let's talk about the installation. We'll come back to this, but let's start off in the unfinished garage where I've done something a little bit unique because most split minis, the condenser is put outside. I put it in my garage space, which is very well ventilated, and we'll talk about that. So we'll cut through. So, when doing a split mini system, you got to think about where the condenser is going to live. In my case, I'm in Colorado, 7,500 foot elevation. It gets cold, and these systems are designed to operate, particularly from a heating perspective, at a cutoff of 5 degrees. If I put it outside, there would be times that it's going to be below 5 degrees, particularly with wind chill. And if I put it in this unfinished space that's enclosed and sheltered, then I can pretty much be sure I'm never going to drop below that 5 degree mark. So, sorry for the congestion of bikes, but you'll see my condensing unit is over here on the floor. And I did not hard mount it to the floor. I hard mounted it to some treated 2x6s, shimmed it to make it perfectly balanced. And I did that so that I can move it easily if I have to. So let's talk about installation. There's things they're not going to tell you in the documentation on the website as far as your electrical requirements. They're obviously trying to avoid the risk of condoning unpermitted or unprofessional installation. So couple things. On the side of the condenser unit, there is a label, and that label will show you your fuse maximum requirement. In this case, it was a 20 amp. So, in my breaker box, I installed a 20 amp 2-pole. Okay, pretty straightforward. That is dedicated for the AC unit. What I've done was I've run 220 through, over, and down to a disconnect. A disconnect is required. I just did a basic 60 amp disconnect. And you've got a 2-wire plus ground. I did 12 gauge wire just because that's what's required for a 20 amp service. If you've got a bigger unit, you'll need a bigger fuse, breaker, and you'll need thicker gauge wire, maybe 10 gauge. 12 gauge covers quite a bit, but just keep that in mind. So from the disconnect, I've got a whip going over, again with 12 gauge, to the condenser unit itself. So you'll notice that in the corner, we've got the whip going in for electric, and then we've also got the line for the head unit going in. That's your 2 copper lines and your electrical feed. Down below on the ground, you'll see that I've also fed my hose for the condenser unit drainage and the head unit drainage. If it's heating, the condenser unit's going to bleed off. If it is air conditioning, then the head unit is going to condense water, so they both need to drain. So, one thing to note is it doesn't come with drain pipe. Get drain pipe or break down a 5/8 inch garden hose. That's what I did. So, either one works. So, let's go up and look at the ceiling. This is the back side of the head unit that's in the office. So a 3 5/8 inch hole is required, slight angle downward to pass your line through. And that includes your copper lines, electrical, and your drain pipe. Make sure the drain pipe's on the bottom. It's a gravity thing. In this case, I've got a very slight downward slope so that the water doesn't, so it drains in the right direction. A good trick for drilling those 3 5/8 inch holes is either you go buy yourself a hole saw or you get an adjustable hole saw. You'll see that in my tool display later. So it comes down at a slight angle so the water drains downhill, and I've got it just draining into my concrete control lines because I've got this, this space drained through a daylight drain. The water will make its way there. So, tools. This is kind of a layout of the tools that I used. Typical 12-2 wire for your, that's sized appropriately because you need 2 hots and a ground to the disconnect and from the disconnect. I used an adjustable hole saw to drill through drywall. If you're going through something harder, you'll have to use probably a proper hole saw, but since I was doing indoors, it made it really easy to drill my hole appropriately. Couple wrenches for doing your quick, kind of your DIY quick connects. You don't have to worry about flaring, so the line set went into the condenser really easily. Screwdrivers, obviously, couple wire cutters and such. So an important thing to note that I realized after the fact, and it's not really obvious, is when you have everything hooked up, you're ready to power the system on, where the line set, copper lines connect to the condenser, make sure to read your instructions for the installation. There's 2 caps that have to be removed and an Allen key, a 5mm Allen key that has to be fully turned out on both of those valves that get the juices flowing. So that's important, otherwise the system's not going to operate appropriately. So now let's go back inside to the head unit. So don't forget to let those valves open. I've tacked up my line sets. Make sure you get your gravitational flow for your drainage lines. Don't forget your disconnect. Size your breaker accordingly. 20 amp is good for an 18,000 BTU unit. So now we come back up to the head unit. So the head unit is, again, I'm calling it a head unit, is pretty straightforward. It's really lightweight. It's mostly anchored with wall anchors because I think all said and done, it's about 30 pounds. And I've got it held in with like 6 wall anchors and 2 screws that I was able to get into studs. So that thing's going nowhere. Very easy to maintain, very easy to mount. They got kind of a base plate that you install, and then the head unit clicks onto that. make sure and set it level. That's important for your drainage. So pretty straightforward. Now let's take a look at the documentation and the controls real quick. So I've kind of laid it out. You get installation manual, user manual for the mini-split, and then user manual for the remote control. It comes with this remote control, and then it's got warranty, registration, and what I did, it's a good tip I would suggest, take a picture of your label on your condenser unit, take a picture of your label on your head unit, and then put that with your warranty information so it's easy to get to your serial numbers so you don't have to go fishing through stuff. Easy to get to serial numbers, easy to get to model information. And then I just registered online. Okay, so couple little things to note, and I'm still playing with it, is it comes with a remote control, but it also comes with Wi-Fi enabled. So if you look over here, I've got a remote Wi-Fi unit, and this is what allows it to connect to my cell phone for iPhone or Android app control. And it's really cool. I can control temperature. It's important that the IR has line of sight to the head unit. It's pretty broad, but with the camera in the way, if I were to make an adjustment, it probably wouldn't send it to the head unit because the cameraman's blocking it. But just be aware. The other thing I suspect is something that'll be fixed with software in the future, but if I make an adjustment with that manual remote control, it does not register that adjustment with the app, and so one will override the other, if that makes sense. They're not smart enough to communicate with each other. It's not a big deal, but it's something that to be noted. You can set schedules. You can, in my case, I tell it to be 68 degrees in the winter during the office hours and drop down to 61 degrees in the evening. So I'm managing energy consumption, and you can set schedules to make sure it does that. So again, big takeaways. Look on the side of your condenser unit for what size breaker you're going to need. It'll say fuse maximum, and I went with the 20 amp. Don't forget to undo your valves with that Allen key so that the fluids can start rolling. And make sure that you have gravitational flow for your drain hoses and that you have a drain hose because it doesn't come with it in the kit. But pretty straightforward. I literally installed this thing myself. The only exception is when I went to lift that head unit to put the line set through the hole, I had my wife help me pull the line set through the hole. Other than that, I did it on my own, everything. So this is definitely a prosumer DIY installation, but if you're handy and you have done projects around the house to include electrical, you can do this, but you should really get a professional certified electrician to do the electrical hookups. Keep that in mind. So that's it. If there's any questions, hit me up. Happy to answer them, but I'm thrilled with the unit. Super quiet, super efficient. Cannot wait to try it out in the summer. So thanks a lot, HVAC Direct. You guys made it really easy for me to make a good decision, and I think I've made a good decision.